Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob Space Trucker Chapter 36, Le Fun. Billy Bob slowly walked forward through the fog, finding himself on the bank of a river as he approached a man sitting on a chair, casting a fishing line out into the water. He had grey hair and a big moustache, foregoing the optical surgery for glasses. As Billy Bob walked through the bushes, the man looked over his shoulder and gave the chair next to him a pat. "The fish ain't biting for crap, but it's a nice spot, isn't it, kid? Hey, Grandpa." He took a seat next to his mom's father, picking up the fishing pole next to him and casting it out into the river. He looked up at the sky and felt like they were in some nice, serene river valley up in the mountains, but he couldn't really see anything that he recognized. When he looked down, he noticed that he was wearing white. "Oh, this is one of those stupid dream things, isn't it?" "Seems that way. I should have known when I found you out here fishing instead of a strip club. 2 happiest days of my life, marrying your grandmother and putting her in the ground. She was a great woman, but after a few decades I was dying for some strange." "Gross." Billy Bob thought it over for a moment and then looked at his grandfather. "Wait, why aren't we in a strip club? I figured your wrinkly old rear would take every chance to be in one." Suddenly, they were in a club with low lights in front of a stage as Billy Bob averted his gaze from a muscular man in a banana hammock performing in front of them. "What the frick? What? I thought you were into guys. I brought us to the Golden Banana." "Damn it, Grandpa, how many times have I told you that being part of the dance team in school doesn't mean that I'm gay? No harm if you are. What an adult does with another consenting adult is their choice. Not gay." His grandfather shrugged and they were in the cockpit of a Longhorn instead. He looked around and smiled as he looked out into the dark, deep space. It was comforting. "That's better. I didn't mean to go to a strip club, you know. I just meant that you always seem to be in one." "The hell I am. I'm a busy man for my age. I'm only in the strip clubs 3 nights a week. Maybe 4. Nothing wrong with living up my age." The old man grinned and leaned back in his chair, popping open a beer as he took a sip. "Speaking of, you're not dead, are you? You moved to Texas, too, to hunt lavafish. Last I heard, at any rate. Did a stripper give you a heart attack, you dirty old man? My ticker as strong as a bull's. Course, if a gal did give me a heart attack, it wouldn't be from looking, if you know what I mean." He grinned and chuckled as Billy Bob rolled his eyes. "Gross again. Why am I talking to you and not Grandma?" He kept his hands on the controls, watching the FTL lanes as he drove. He'd have to keep a steady pace if he wanted to make his 99. Why would you talk to her? All she'd do is scold you for being a degenerate who plays sissy sports. Baseball is not a sissy sport. You don't tackle anyone or nothing. Hardly anyone gets concussion. Your mother was the best damn football player her high school had ever had. She's got bigger balls than most men, including your no-good father. I never did approve of her marrying a fancy city boy. Too pretty for his own good." Billy Bob sighed and shook his head for a moment. "I really wouldn't call him a city boy. He didn't know everyone in his hometown. Clearly, he's a city boy." "Okay. Regardless, does this all mean that I'm not dead? I mean, why am I talking to you if you're still alive?" "Well, maybe I'm an enlightened Buddhist monk, astral projection and stuff." Billy Bob laughed at that. "Not a fricking chance. When I asked you what you thought about reincarnation that one time and past lives, you told me you must have been a fricking saint before to get born in America, and you wanted to live it up to sin your brains out." He heard his grandpa give a sort of old man part chuckle, part giggle. "The poor bastards don't drink or frick or nothing. They ain't living. Then I am dead and you're dead. Or this is a dream. Crap, the suit mentioned brain damage. I could have told you that. No one with the right mind joins the dance team. I'll have you know that I got all kinds of girls in high school thanks to my dancing." Sure. Stick a wig and some lipstick on them and they'll pass for a girl in the dark. "This is why I never hung out with you." The old man shrugged, and then he held the beer for Billy Bob, who popped it open and took a heavy sip while keeping an eye on the FTL lane. "So, am I supposed to learn something? My girl taught you everything that I taught her, so hell if I know. Maybe this is to teach you not to get fricked up so much and learn how to fight properly. He took another sip of his beer and let out a belch. I know how to fight, Grandpa. Billy Bob sighed for a moment. That's not what your brother said. What? T-Rex, my brother who's built like a fricking tank. The same brother who's a Special Forces legend. The same brother who entered the bull riding competition in high school and was disqualified for punching his bull in the face because it tossed him off and knocked it out. That guy says I can't fight. Yeah, when you ask that guy if I can't fight, he's going to say no. He's my fricking brother on top of all of that stuff. Billy Bob snorted. I just wanted to fly things. Hey, the damn Space Force. I was sure you were gay when you became a pilot. They're not gay. He paused and thought back on his career with Space Force and the volleyball courts in basic. Well, not all gay. He paused for a moment and then looked over at his grandfather. Wait, were you hoping I was gay? The old man shrugged. I figured your sister's a dyke. Might as well have a gay grandson to even it out. What about Cousin Davy? He's gay. How do you not know this? He married a man. I thought that was for health insurance, or something. Billy Bob sighed and shook his head, unsure if his grandfather was serious. Then he realized he wasn't sure if he thought his grandfather really didn't know, or not, in real life. This was confusing, but it did sound like something his grandpa wouldn't realize somehow. So, am I supposed to talk to you and then figure out if I want to live or die, or crap? Frick if I know. You probably just a vegetable in some hospital, all brain dead and stuff. God, I hope not. His grandpa shrugged and took another sip of the beer before pointing out the window. You're too close to that guy. Hey, who's the pilot here? I'm fine the next system stop isn't for half a light year, and he won't be getting off for a while if he even stops there. The grandfather shrugged. So, if you aren't as queer as a $3 bill, how come you don't got kids? 'Cause I'm a man of the FTL lanes. I like moving and traveling and stuff. I don't want to settle down yet. I'm only in my 20s after all. Pretty late 20s, you'll soon be too old. Having kids in your 30s is not too old. Meh. Billy Bob shook his head and drank more of his beer, as his grandfather finished his off and then got off his seat to go back to get another one. Anyway, I don't think I'll be having kids. I'll like a girl, but she's a Xeno. Oh, Xeno lover. That makes sense. If it wasn't guys, it would be Xenos. But is she Xeno and not a he Xeno? Yes. Does she have nice tits? Jesus Christ, Grandpa. What? I can totally understand if she's got a nice rack. Or 3 or 4. Hell, maybe even 6 big ones. Show me the Xeno and half a dozen big old vagunzas, and I'll suffocate to death. I need to hear this exactly 0%. Billy Bob said as he slowly shook his head and rubbed his face in disbelief. The sort of disbelief when an older relative does something horrible, but for some reason you just can't call them out on it, for reasons that you don't quite understand, so you just can't believe it. How the hell do you think you got your kid? I've wrecked your grandmother, and at some point she had a bunch of kids, one of which was your mum. At this point, Billy Bob was loudly speaking gibberish to try and down at his grandfather. She went against my wishes and fricked your dad, and obviously they boned quite a bit, 'cause they're a middle of 5. You do know that old people still have sex, right? I swear to God, old man, if you don't stop right there, I'll toss you out the airlock. You can't tell me that when you were my age you wanted to hear this stuff from your grandfather. He glared at his grandpa for a moment, and the old man thought it over before shrugging. Yeah, probably right. Then he sat down for a while as Billy Bob drove through the space lanes before suddenly realizing something. Wait, why am I driving? This isn't real. I still don't know if I'm dead or alive or in a coma or what. He looked over at his grandpa and then back out, still working as if driving mattered since he wasn't sure what was going on. What are we even doing here? Who knows? Probably just your last brain cells either dying or getting back to work. Let you talk things out through yourself. Learn things. I didn't learn anything. There you go, that's the point. So you never tell me if your Xeno girl's got nice tits. Stop. Fine. Gonna have kids with her. She's a Xeno. Well, have you tried? No, but we are a different species. This isn't Star Trek where somehow everyone's a human with a different paint and they can all apparently interbreed. I'll be lucky if I get out of sex with my hide intact. Ah, a real scratcher, huh? Sounds like my kind of girl. Either way, you should at least try having kids with her, because trying is the fun part. Having kids is really overrated, and if it doesn't work, just keep trying. Is that my takeaway from all of this? Sure. That and the fact that if you don't wake up, your mother is about to punch you in the face. He opened his eyes just as he saw the fist racing towards his face. He tried to move, but he didn't have a chance, and he was caught the blow with his red cheek, making his teeth click, and the blow turned his head to the side. Ow! Frick! He really wasn't aware of much else around him, but he could see the white walls and people in scrubs, and his mother standing over him. What's your name? What? He started to reach up and clutch his face, but the pain was receding faster than he expected. She grabbed his shoulder and began to shake him physically. What's your name? Jesus Christ, Mom, you know my name. It's B-Robbo, Space Trucker. He was sitting up now, rubbing his face as he looked around the room. His mom was in her garrison uniform, and obviously not her power suit, or she would have killed him with that punch. Even so, he was a little surprised at how much the blow had initially hurt. There were a few doctors or nurses, or whatever people around staring at him, and her looking surprised. He was hooked up to some machines and had an IV of blue-purple stuff leading into his arm. He'd been dreaming about, something. He couldn't remember. The hell was that from, Mom? These weaklings told me that you needed time and you may never come out of your coma, and if you did, there is a chance that you'd have brain damage and not remember your name. I told them that was crap, and then I'd prove it. So you punched me in the face. It worked, didn't it? He long ago learned that it was better not to point out to his mother that some solutions didn't require hitting people. You did strike a superior officer, you know, he muttered as he tried to figure out how the rest of him was feeling. He was, sore, pretty much everywhere, especially his face after that hit. Superior officer, lardy fricking da. You might outrank me, but you're not superior to Major Berry Sue. She gave him a whack upside the head for giving her lip, and he grumbled, but was smart enough to keep those grumbles in distinct murmurs. One of the doctors, he assumed, stepped forward. So, do you feel all right? I feel sore. Do you remember how you gotcha? Do you mean in a philosophical sense, or the sense that I got fricked up in a fight in front of the Xeno Capitol Tower thing? Interesting. You seem to handle the biogel much better than the others. What? Isn't that supposed to work on everyone? He asked as he glanced around. We're still trying to figure out how it works, but humans aren't entirely compatible without issue. Apparently it works best when you're very seriously injured, but if you only have minor wounds, it acts funny. B-Robbo snorted. Guess it's a good thing I keep having major wounds, huh? Yeah, they fricked you up good. This was from his mom, which made him roll his eyes. Thanks, Mom. If I had been there, you could bet your ass things would have gone better. Yes, Mom. I guess you're not much of a complete frick-up as I figured you were. He sighed for a moment. Glad I could lessen your disappointment. What? I was never disappointed. You know I love you and your brothers and sisters all. It's just that you've joined the Space Force, and were a pilot, and then a space trucker. I was worried you'd never live up to the family name. He laughed at that. Thanks, Mom. I guess it's true that the last name, like... The door opened up and she saw Stevie Ray lean in. Sup, Booger Blaster? Hey, Snot Wrangler. That starts with a W, you know. We didn't know that as kids, so it still counts. What are you doing here? Where the hell are we, anyway? He looked around as the doctors, or nurses, or whoever, backed up to let his younger brother slip in and get closer to the bed. Gemini, his mom said. Crap, that's quite a ways from the capital world. How long was I out? Couple weeks, his brother said. What's going on with the war? How did I get you? The USS Predator was in system when you started the assault. They got to the capital shortly after your apparent last stand. Some bird commander used the last of his biogel to get you stable. Then that diplomat killed a few remaining ceremonial guards around the place. When the Archangels landed, they found only minimal resistance in the area, apparently. They seized the tower and got you and the birds out. Nice job with the flag, by the way. Apparently you crazy fricks had killed most of the crabs and fish in the capital crater thing. The Archangels got the now friendly Xenos to evac the crater and then destroy the grav generator so that we could actually hold that crater. He nodded slowly as his mom told him what happened. Wait, still hold it. Shouldn't the war be over? She laughed at that as she shook her head. Frick no. Remember, the only races that had any real military were the crabs, the fish, and those lizard fly things. Fleckos, Billy Bob said as she shrugged. Well, the member races all pulled out of the alliance, but their military is still intact. The crabs retreated from Bastion, but there's still a war going on. The Fleckos, or whatever, are good at fighting the other races. They can't fight us, so they're trying to start bullying the closest systems to them. This is a fight to the death, no one's surrendering. But now all of the supply routes are in chaos, and lots of contested territory. It's a giant mess, and it'll help us out, to be sure. But things aren't going away overnight. What happened to the Libertonians? The ones who survived, you mean? They're alive. The one who patched you up got pretty messed up. They were dropped off on their home planet as they were here. The diplomat one wanted to stay with you, but her people wouldn't allow her to go. Her mom shrugged. The ship I was on is now defunct. While waiting for a reassignment, they were bringing you back in, so they gave me control of you long haul. Stevie Ray said, "Oh, what the frick? Don't they know that you're a horrible pilot? Bite me, crapbag. Come here and I will." He opened his mouth and leaned towards his brother, who laughed and just shoved him against his raised bed. Crap, you're lucky I'm so weak right now. He did feel rather tired, but that was preferable to being dead, so he didn't complain. Who else is here? It's just us, Stevie Ray said. Mom complained about being pulled off the line, but they told her she'd get 2 weeks before they started advancing again anyway. I'm pretty happy with my new posting. Teddy is off killing Xenos, wherever. Mary Jane is supposedly leading some ghost squad on a planet where she's using trained crabs as mounts. What the frick? Yeah, but that's MJ, and you know it. Billy Bob nodded after that, thinking about it for a moment. Jackie, Jill, and Dad are still in Bastion, helping rebuild until the front starts moving again. What's the plan? You heal up and we send you back to Earth so President Crusher can put a medal on you. That's President Cross Stevie Ray, his mother corrected. Billy Bob was shaking his head. No. I gotta see the Libertonians. He swung his feet over the side of the bed and started to stand, only to nearly collapse as Stevie Ray had to catch him. Christ, Billy Bob, there's a reason you're hooked up to all this stuff. You spent a couple weeks comatose, muscle atrophy and all. Billy Bob panted a bit, feeling sweat and tired, and all the ill-fated attempt to stand up. Okay, get me a wheelchair then. The doctors were approaching once more. That's not advised at all. We'd like to monitor you for another week, not to mention that you need a new biogel dispenser hooked up to keep you heating properly. I can't stress how close to dying you've been the whole time. Stevie Ray, can you hook one of these things up from the Longhorn? I guess. Well, as a colonel, I order you to get to it. He pointed at his mom. Major, I order you to get me a wheelchair, and if anyone tries to stop you, clock 'em good. His mother laughed. There we go, now you're living up to the name. The doctors began to panic as Billy Bob and Clan staged a breakout of the hospital. No one was sure what to do when they were trying a highly decorated Special Forces major and his son, who was a colonel, and the soon-to-be also highly decorated one at that. And soon Stevie Ray was wheeling Billy Bob into the back of the Longhorn, while their mom kept the soldiers at bay with a large wrench. "Stomper!" Billy Bob cried out with a smile, but the multi-legged fox ran up to him. Once Stevie Ray brought him aboard, the creature lived up to his name, stomping the ground and the wheelchairs. Billy Bob rubbed his head, turning to wave his mother as he saw her on the back of the hatch when it started to close as Stevie Ray got him in the air. They ignored the demands from the brass to return to the hospital, and Stevie Ray had hooked up the dispenser in the main cabin for Billy Bob so that they were all set. Mittens provided him with plenty of company as he sat around heating up. The FTL lanes around the human space had been reactivated since the remaining Council forces had all been pulled back to their own territories. But it was still slow going with the war on. Took them 5 days to get from Gemini to the Libertonian homeworld. They were still skirmishing with the crabs in space between their planets in the systems, but neither side had moved much. Once he announced their presence to the Libertonians, they were brought in to escort Billy Bob to see the Libertonian homeworld. Well, the real thing. He'd seen that painting he helped Emily steal. Lots of mountains and gorgeous-looking river valleys. He wasn't sure what the gas at the bottom of the valleys was. They seemed like building cities on top of the mountains, and he saw plenty of them flying as they landed near the big city. he figured was the capital. He wondered how long it would take for him to get a hold of Emily. She was probably stuck in some sort of boring meeting or debrief or something. He walked out the airlock of the Longhorn, moving around slowly but surely, since he had a few days of steady biogel and Earth standard gravity to get his muscles working again. Then, as he opened up the hatch, Emily was right in front of him. Bah! She jumped with a big smile. Billy Bob! But she crossed the threshold where she was hit with the heavier gravity and dropped heavily against him, knocking him back as he hit the floor of the cabin with a heavy thud, feeding a crack of pain through his skull. Bah! He whimpered as she looked down at him. Oh no! Not again. Stevie Ray was moving back and quickly lowered the gravity for her as she got up off of Billy Bob. Jesus, lady! He helped Billy Bob up, setting him down on the chair that they had just sat up next to the biogel dispenser, quickly sticking the tube back into his arm. You'd think the two of you were an item the way that you jumped on the guy. Stevie Ray laughed at that, and then looked at Emily, who was glancing away, and then over at Billy Bob, who was smiling. So that's why you rushed, aren't you? Ah, well, I'll go see what's around here then. He passed Emily and closed the airlock behind him. Emily looked at Billy Bob and then laughed. I can't stop hurting you, can I? Doesn't seem that way. He rubbed the back of his head gingerly, feeling better as the biogel released it to his body. I'm just so happy to see you. I can't tell you how worried I was at the Capitol when I found you outside. She climbed up onto his lap as he blinked up at her, a little surprised, but in no position to stop her. She was wearing a black vest as usual and a tuft of feathers covering her area that still expected to find cleavage. The survival suit was gone, but she was wearing those special gloves, thankfully, and her lower body was clad in black pants that still reminded him of bell-bottoms. Had to make room for those bell-bottoms, he guessed. She rubbed the two upper hands along his face, her lower hands against his chest and arched a brow. You seem, frisky. I am, and it seems to me that you're currently hooked up to a machine that pumps you full of biogel as needed. Isn't that the case? He looked up over his head at the dispenser and back at her. Yes, that's true. Well, you were worried about what might happen, and now, in case anything goes wrong, you're already set. She blinked and slowly arched a brow. She shifted on his lap a bit, hands moving over to his shirt already. Shouldn't we be worried about my brother? You saw him, he's giving us our space. Who else knows you're here? He thought it over for a moment, and then slowly shrugged. I guess this is probably the best time for it. She laughed at that and nodded. Plus, I've really missed you. He laughed at that, hands moving to rub her sides. Well, crap. I guess since I'm already healing, this couldn't possibly make things worse. She giggled and leaned in to give him neck a nip as he gasped, the biogel starting to pump a little faster. About 5 minutes later, neither of them were expecting the airlock to open up as he heard Stevie Ray. Hey, the bird president and the space hamsters president wanted to thank you guys for... He stopped as he stepped out of the airlock into the main cabin and looked at Billy Bob and Emily, who were both staring back at him in a mixture of surprise and horror. Stepping around Stevie Ray was the Libertonian in a very nice-looking suit, who also froze, and squeezing between them was the space hamster in a tuxedo, complete with a top hat, cane, and monocle. I say, we weren't properly introduced before. I'm so glad to meet you. I used to be the Galwaldian counselor. He walked up to Emily and Billy Bob. They were in the same position as before, with her on his lap on the wheelchair, and their clothes were elsewhere. Emily looked to Billy Bob, who reached out and shook the offered hand of the hamster without saying anything. And then Emily did the same. The hamster glanced around at the clothes on the floor. I say, were you two in the midst of laundry? Stevie Ray stepped forward, picking up the hamster as Bliss squeaked in surprise. What's going on? Sorry, Mr. Prime Hamster. They're just, it's stuff. He backed out of the airlock, carrying the hamster, as the Libertonian president stayed for another moment and gave the thumbs up and nodded after he looked them over before following suit. Locking the airlock behind him, another moment Billy Bob and Emily began to laugh. They were left alone after that. So, what's all this again? Emily was asking as Billy Bob finished cooking the cabin's small kitchen. Biscuits and gravy. Chicken, fried steak, and eggs. He smiled as he slid a large plate in front of her. Dig in. The next day they had to spend actually interacting with the others on the planet. Billy Bob met several officials and the president again. He had to put up with having his picture taken quite a lot and needed his wheelchair again by the end of the day. But Emily had always been with him, which made it easier to deal with. In the end, he knew he couldn't stay. The brass were demanding he return already, and she still couldn't get permission to leave since she was also needed for the war effort. They stood outside his longhorn with a crate between them. I didn't get a chance to find you after the commandos got us off the planet. So this is the gift you got me, huh? He nodded at that, bought it with some of my 10 billion credits. He grinned as she stared at him for a moment. Billy Bob, yeah, I know. As a colonel of the US military, I can't take large gifts from foreign governments. I'm well aware. Once the war started, I realized what would happen. It might have been about the money once, but not anymore. He shrugged and then he opened the box. She frowned as she pulled out what was inside. It was some sort of strange box with a harness connected to it, with a set of headphones with some extra straps on it. What is it? I found it in a curio shop on the Goblin Station. They're fascinated with music from my home world, a ways back. They only had vinyl records back then, so someone made a portable record player with a harness that fits the Livertonian. Same as the headphones, that way you can fly and listen to music. She let out a surprised squawk and then laughed, starting to pull the harness onto her to see how it worked. And then, in the end, she still had a full motion of her wings and arms, and the box was settled against her chest. He smiled and then leaned up as she leaned down, nuzzling his cheek with her beak. I love it, Billy Bob. Thank you. He smiled. I loaded a record in there that starts with the greatest song that I could possibly think of. Feel free to start listening to it. Me and Stevie Ray gotta go, but I will be back. We'll meet up again soon, somewhere, somehow. They held hands for a little longer, her lower set rubbing his sides. Once more they leaned in to rub cheek to beak before pulling away. She started the record once he had boarded the Longhorn. The music began to play, and she stood there on the landing pad, letting the music pour out of the custom headphones. It took about a minute before the singing finally began. I'll leave here tomorrow. Would you still remember me? For I must be travelling on now, 'cause there are many places I've got to see. She felt tears start to roll up in her eyes. But if I stayed here with you, girl, things couldn't be the same, 'cause I'm as free as a bird now. And this bird you cannot change. Oh, and this bird you cannot change. And this bird you cannot change. Lord knows that I can't change. The singing stopped for a minute, and then the Longhorn took off. Moving up slowly, she quickly ran to the edge of the platform, leaping off as she took flight, working hard to keep up with the ship as she saw Billy Bob in co-pilot's seat where she used to sit. He looked over to her and smiled, waving as she listened to the lyrics start again. Bye, bye, baby. It's been a sweet love, yeah. Though this feeling can't change, please don't take it so badly. 'Cause Lord knows I'm to blame. She was flapping her wings harder to keep up now, the tears streaming down her eyes as she smiled, flying as fast as she could. But if I stayed here with you, girl, things just couldn't be the same. 'Cause I am free as a bird now, and this bird cannot change. Oh, and this bird cannot change, and this bird cannot change. Lord knows that I can't change. Lord help me, I can't change. The tempo of the song began to build up as they flew, with Billy Bob looking over to Stevie Ray, saying something as the Longhorn began to dip and dive, letting Emily swoop down, twisting and spinning alongside as she flew. Lord, I can't change. Won't you fly high? Free bird, yeah. The ship began to pull up, and she shifted to climb, she listened to the music, wings beating harder and harder as she flew almost straight up to try and stay even with the Longhorn. She could see Billy Bob laughing and smiling and crying as much as she was at this point. The music kept playing, and she kept up as they rose higher and higher, the sky growing darker and darker as her breath started to come out in puffs. She never dared fly this high before. Finally, she couldn't rise any higher, gasping out as she had an angle down, starting to glide and to level out as she turned to fly, back down, face up, to watch the Longhorn keep going up into the sky as the song reached a fever pitch before finally breaking. As she began to glide back down towards her home, she saw the longhorn get smaller and smaller until she couldn't see it anymore, and the song didn't really end. It just faded away. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.